School. Dr. Gueston will begin with some opening remarks, and then we will give those in attendance an opportunity to ask questions. We ask that you please raise your hand whenever that time comes, and then we will call on you, unmute you, and allow you to ask your question. So that being said, I will now turn it over to Phoenix Union Superintendent, Dr. Chad Gueston.
Good afternoon, and appreciate each and every one of you spending time today. And I think more importantly, thank you for your care and concern for the Cesar Chavez community. I do want to just start by re-extending my thoughts and prayers to the young man at Cesar Chavez who's currently recovering in the hospital. And I think just as relevant, but even more tragic, extending our thoughts and prayers to the students and families involved in the tragic shooting at a Michigan high school earlier today. We know that times are challenging today, especially as we still navigate the pandemic, a lot of mental health challenges of our students and for our students. And the reality is, what we know is that schools are asked to do a lot today, not just focus on the academic readiness and preparedness of our students, but also to focus equally, if not more, on the social, emotional, and physical safety and well-being of our students. I do think it's important that we thank all educators today. It's an extremely challenging time to be in education, whether you are in school administration, teacher, counselor, social worker, psychologist, or an education support professional. I think it's extremely important that all of us in the media, in education, and those out of education are grateful to educators. It's a more challenging time than ever, but I think a more important time than ever to be in education. Yesterday, as you are aware, and I won't go over too many of the details because there have been a couple of press conferences done by Phoenix PD, including one earlier today, but at Cesar Chavez High School yesterday after school. Unfortunately, two young men were involved in an altercation that ultimately, as you heard from Phoenix PD today, turned out to be a gun sale gone wrong, where one individual was injured. That particular individual, as I mentioned, is currently recovering in the hospital. Phoenix PD did also announce today that the other individual involved is in custody. It's an ongoing investigation, so specific details about these young men or the investigation, please ask that you continue to send those to our partners at Phoenix Police Department. Today at Cesar Chavez High School was a great day at Cesar Chavez High School. Just like it is virtually every day, it was a great day to be a Chavez champion. As we know in working with Phoenix PD, we believe that yesterday was an isolated incident and are not concerned about follow-up incidents. However, as we should, out of an abundance of caution, we did increase safety measures today on our campuses, including increased personnel, no backpacks allowed today, and just made sure that Cesar Chavez High School had a day like it normally has, a great day for staff and students to work and learn. I do want to thank everyone involved today at Chavez for their ongoing support. And even yesterday, as we cleared campus, this incident did occur yesterday after school. It involved our campus security and admin having to do a combination of clearing campus, shelter in place, and reunification at Cesar Chavez Park. I do want to make sure that that we all remember that although incidents like this do cause concern, that Cesar Chavez High School is an amazing place. It's an amazing place for kids to learn, for staff to work. It's home to Arch, the third micro school in Phoenix Union, that has one of the most decorated academic decathlon programs in the state of Arizona, has a highly recognized sports and arts program, and has remarkable academic and support services for all students that call Chavez home. And Chavez is also a very safe place. Yesterday's incident did feel scary. I had a chance to meet with all Cesar Chavez staff this morning, had a chance to unpack what occurred yesterday, talk about short-term and long-term implications. And in that conversation, I had a chance to remind the Cesar Chavez community that Cesar Chavez today is home to 2,684 students. And yesterday, 2,682 students made really wise decisions to keep campus safe after school. And although the actions of two created some uncertainty and fear in that community, Cesar Chavez is a great place to be. And let me end my opening remarks with this. We want to be very clear that in Phoenix Union, firearms and violence have no place. Not at Cesar Chavez, not at any of our schools, not at any of our properties. They have no place at Phoenix Union. That we set the highest of expectations for our staff and our students. We also know that we work every day with nearly 30,000 beautiful young men and young women who are teenagers, and teenagers make mistakes. Some of those mistakes are more grave and more serious than others, and the more serious the behavior, the more serious the consequence. And we will continue to do everything we can every single day to make sure that our campuses are welcoming and loving and safe places for every single person that calls Phoenix Union home. And with that, I'm happy to start answering questions.
Again, thank you all for attending this afternoon. We will go ahead and start with Zach Crenshaw. Please state your name and your outlet, and then you can go ahead and ask Dr. Guestin your questions. Zach, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, go for it.
Me now?
No problem. All right, Zach, let's try it again.
Can you? Okay. Hey, Zach Crenshaw with ABC 15, Superintendent Doctor. Thank you for taking the question. I want to ask you two things. The first would be, it feels a little strange to see more off-duty officers here today, no backpacks allowed. In this day, if you're calling it an isolated incident, and then just a day later, there's this kind of reaction, a lot of parents are wondering why this reaction for just a single day in light of the school resource officers being moved off campus into that more regional model. And are you, reconsidering that at all in light of what happened, at Cesar Chavez yesterday, and then what happened in Michigan today?
Yeah, so two parts, why increased measures today, and then big picture around school resource officers. First of all, what we know to be true is that even when we have an isolated incident, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty. And as we've met with staff and students, not just at Chavez, but around the broader community, they know that the day after an incident, people want to come and feel extra safe that next day. And yeah, we did have a couple of officers on campus today, but the really presence that we saw were extra personnel from around Phoenix Union, extra counselors, extra social workers, just to make sure that when everybody came back to school today, it felt normal, felt welcoming, felt loving. And so that's why today it was really important to make sure we had extra presence. What we know to be true, not just here in Arizona, but in our nation, that the day after an incident is really important. It's important to get back to normal right away. And the way to do that is to increase presence and support. Again, it was a great day. We'll begin to go back to our typical safety procedures on our campuses. And again, are just grateful to everybody who played a role today. And then your second part to your question is around school resource officers. Would this particular incident in and of itself make us revisit the school resource officer conversation? That's a complicated question. I think I'll try to answer that in a couple of ways. First of all, this one incident would not make us rethink where we stand today with school resource officers. And that's in part for a few reasons. One, I think it's really important that everybody understand that school safety today is extremely complex, and it's very multifaceted. And Phoenix Union a few years ago published a new safety plan. It's called Next Gen Safety Security, and that plan has 12 components, and not 2, not 4, not 6, not 1, not just a school resource officer, but 12. And what we know is to have highly safe campuses, it involves everything from fencing to perimeters to entrances to cameras to smoke detectors to fire alarms, all the way to policies and procedures to safety personnel to evening school safety plans and after school safety plans. And law enforcement is one small part of that. We're grateful for the relationship that we have, especially over the last 24 hours. But in order to have safe campuses, I know that some believe that it requires a school resource officer. The reality is that in our country today, there are many highly safe schools that don't have police officers. And there are also highly safe schools that do have them. And Phoenix Union, like many other systems in our nation, is really rethinking about the relationship between schools and law enforcement. Do we have a presence every day from an officer? Or do we have a regional model? Do we just work with law enforcement when we need it? We're continuing to work with our own community and local PD on the right relationship.
Thank you for your questions, Mr. Crenshaw. I see that you requested a follow-up. We do want to get to everyone. We will come back to you after we've allowed our other hands up for your follow-up. So next, we're going to go to Matt Galka. Please state your name and your affiliate.
Fox 10 Phoenix. A quick follow-up to Zach's question about the school resource officers. I know you mentioned there are schools out there that are, sorry, hang on one second with the echo. I know you mentioned there are schools out there that are safe without them. There are schools out there that are safe with them. But do you think in this particular case that a school resource officer could have prevented something like this from happening because a student would at least know there was an armed police presence on campus? And the second part of that question is, we understand there are no metal detectors at Cesar Chavez School. Is that going to be reconsidered in the future?
Great. So question number one was around the presence of an SRO and what would that have meant for the incident yesterday, and the second around metal detectors. So first of all, let's put the previous school resource officer program that we had in perspective. Phoenix Union has 32,000 souls that come to one of our properties every single day. And in the past, we've had somewhere between 10 and 12 school resource officers. Over 22 properties, over 30,000 people. The expectation that school resource officers would provide safety at all times for every single person on every single property was just not reasonable. Phoenix Union has very clear safety practices and protocols in place with or without the presence of police. Even when we had SROs, there were many days when SROs worked 410s or were off on trainings. Campuses often did not have the presence of police anyway when we had a school resource officer model. And I think even more specifically, to put yesterday in context, to answer your question, Cesar Chavez High School has 128 classrooms, many hallways, 8 sets of bathrooms, 9 buildings, 3 parking lots, and 50 acres. To think that a school resource officer would have been exactly at that place at that time to prevent, I think is not accurate. But we are, again, grateful that when it was time for us to reach out to local law enforcement, they were able to support us. And then second was your question around metal detectors. Phoenix Union does not have metal detectors on our campuses. We like to remind our schools and our communities very proudly that we are a system of schools. We're not an airport, we're not a prison. We expect safety on our campuses, but we do not want to contradict the promise that we made to our community, which is that our campuses will be welcoming and loving and supportive at all times. And the presence of metal detectors is not what we're after. There are other safety protocols like today that we put in place to ensure safe campuses. We also know that metal detectors are not foolproof. And in fact, a lot of the weapons produced today, even firearms that are now 3D printed or a part of kits, can't even be detected by metal detectors. And so it is the other safety procedures and protocols that will help keep our 32,000 staff and students safe. We do have wands in our possession if we ever would need to use those. We have very inconsistently over the past few years. But at this point in time, we do know that other safety measures are much more effective than metal detectors.
Thank you for your question. Next, we'll go to Venton. Please state your full name and your affiliate, please. Venton, are you there? Okay, we will come back to you. If you still have a question, you also can put it in the chat. We can do our best to help you. Next, we will go to Laura Daniela Sepulveda.
I'm with the Arizona Republic. My question is if ghost guns are a concern for Phoenix, and if you plan to address this with students, and if you could please mention some specific ways in which you think of rehearsing more security on campuses.
Yeah, and do you mind repeating that very first part of your question around guns? You cut out a little bit. Sorry, you're muted. Let us unmute you again.
Thank you. My question was whether ghost guns or unregulated firearms are a concern with students selling these on campuses.
Thank you. First of all, the question is, are these more makeshift guns or non-traditional guns a concern? The truth is, this is our first incident that we've dealt with this type of weapon on our campus. We'll work very closely with local law enforcement to determine what we can do in the future to make sure that there is not an increased presence. I think what we all need to continue to grapple with is that the reality is that firearms, traditional and non-traditional, are all too readily available to youth today. Schools didn't create this issue. Unfortunately, we're charged with the task of trying to navigate this issue, but we can't do this alone. This is in partnership with community, parents, our city law enforcement, and of course our own safety procedures. What we know in terms of safety specifically is that we continue to make sure that students understand our expectation that our schools are gun-free zones. There are consequences for firearms, severe consequences for firearms. We also know that relationships matter, that students who see something must say something. And we know that it does not matter if you're in rural Arizona, suburban Arizona, or urban Arizona, that youth can get access to firearms. And one way in which we prevent that is that we make sure that all of our students know that, one, they're not welcome, but two, that if they do know that there's a presence of them on campus, that they are to tell an adult. And then also in Phoenix Union, one of our most important safety measures is that we have large security teams on all of our large campuses, between 10 and 12 security, including a lead security, a base position that watches cameras, and several other security that are doing bathroom sweeps and hallway sweeps and relationship building with students that really get to know our students and create that level of comfort, so that if there is a concern on campus, our security teams are the first to know.
We know that we have someone that's going to be putting one into the chat. That being said, let's go back to Zach Crenshaw and give him an opportunity for his follow-up question. And then we'll take the question in the chat and close up.
Hey, Superintendent. My follow-up question was this. I talked to a parent after school here today who told me that his freshman daughter did not know what the shelter in place was because, according to him, they had not been put through any drills this year. Now, I don't know how accurate that is, but I want to give you the chance to respond in light of the fact that we obviously have been dealing with COVID for the last 20 plus months. How prepared do you think your students are for an active shooter situation? And is that a situation that you discussed with faculty and staff, not just at Cesar Chavez, but at your other schools?
Yes, I appreciate that question. There's an echo.
There's a way you can mute him.
Try to mute me and unmute me and try it again.
All right,
I think
that's better.
No,
there's not. Are you guys getting an echo?
Yeah, I'm
getting an echo. All right. All right, let's try that again. So the question was around emergency preparedness. So I think there's a couple things. One, we do run drills on our campuses. There are multiple types of emergency drills that schools are required to do. Part of those are lockdowns, which we unfortunately typically we've known about a lot in America, where if there's an incident out of school campus or even on school campus where we ask students to go into a building, turn off lights, lock doors, that is a drill that all of our schools are required to do. And then a shelter in place is another way in which we can keep campuses safe. Very similar to yesterday. I shared that yesterday's after-school safety procedure was to do part clearing campus because it was about 10 minutes after dismissal. Those who are on campuses, shelter in place means that they just simply have to stay in the classroom. We lock the doors, lock the buildings, but business can happen as usual inside of a classroom. And then also we did reunification at the park. And then schools also throughout the year will do even another type of drill, which we call a reverse evacuation, which if this incident had happened, let's say during lunch, where we have to practice bringing 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 students from a common space inside and then locking down. And so those are three of the most important drills that schools, not just in Phoenix Union, but Arizona and our nation, have to practice. I don't know the context of that freshman, how long she's been there, if she recently enrolled, but do know that Phoenix Union takes all of our emergency procedures, including emergency crisis planning, very, very seriously.
Thank you. We will read the two questions in the chat, and then we will close up for today. This is from Benton. I understand, Dr. Guestin, this is isolated, and SRO metal detectors can't stop everything. The school is 50 acres, etc. But how do you want parents to receive your thoughts and prayers today instead of saying you want to revisit SROs and metal detectors to at least help prevent something like this from happening? And then a follow-up, what would it take to get those things at the school, a kid being shot and killed?
Excellent. So a couple of things. One, Phoenix Union, I think like all other systems, are constantly revisiting and even when necessary, revising policies and practices. We adopted the Next Gen Safety Security Plan and we'll consistently review that. I know I've received a couple questions about school resource officers today, and is this event gonna trigger a response to bring back SROs? It's certainly rekindling a discussion about school resource officers, but we're in the middle of that discussion anyway in Phoenix Union when we recently made a decision to move toward this community off-duty officer model, that we also simultaneously said that we would engage our students, our staff, and our parents in discussions about what really truly is school safety and what measures need to be in place. Is the Next Gen Safety Security Plan and the 12 components the right plan? Do we have enough supports in place for staff and students? Enough safety measures in place for staff and students? I can't reiterate enough that that school safety is not about school resource officers. School resource officers are a resource. Even when on campuses, they're not engaged in altercations. They simply help school staff manage issues, plan for crises, take reports on abuse and neglect, and of course handle issues like this. I know people believe that in other tragedies across our nation, SROs stepped in and saved the day. Unfortunately, that's not true. What really helps is well-trained staff, strong climate culture. But simply put, we will always take incidents like this, do a review of that incident, and revisit the policy, even publicly, to make sure that that our public feels like they have a voice in what school safety looks like, again, which is why we launched our participatory budgeting process. And there was a second part to that question.
Things at the school.
Yeah, we're, again, we will talk about relationship with law enforcement the same way that we would talk about the number of security we need on campuses and the number of cameras and how many psychologists and social workers we need. It's all a part of one system. And as we talk about next gen safety security, that is a part of our conversation.
Thank you. And here's the final question for today. This is from Hector Lagunas at Univision. Following up on the same topic, Guestin mentioned one officer, perhaps, couldn't have prevented the incident. How about multiple officers in the campus? Considering the size of the campus, it's probably logical to say more than one officer is needed. And what is the reasoning behind not contracting officers? Is it for budget purposes? Finally, as for students, what are the consequences, and could Chavez deny enrollment to a student?
Great. I may need to have you reiterate a couple of those questions. So first of all, the first question was around officer versus officers. Why not have many? For our campuses are very large. I talked specifically about Chavez. We have 10 other campuses that are very similarly sized. I can't reiterate enough that the presence of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 officers is not going to solve all campus safety issues. That's why we have large security teams. That's why we ask our school personnel to be active and visible during school arrival, dismissal, passing periods, lunch. That's why we do bathroom sweeps. SROs were not involved in those. SROs did not do bathroom sweeps. SROs were not involved in making sure that dismissal was safe. That was our job. And if there was an issue, they were called to help us respond to those issues. We also, to your point, don't have unlimited resources. Whether we wanted 5 SROs or we wanted 30 security personnel on our campuses, the reality is that school systems are not equipped financially to dramatically increase in one area. We, at the same time, are educating youth, worried about teacher salaries, making sure that we have enough psychologists and social workers and counselors. We also provide food services and transportation and technology and after-school clubs and sports. Schools are very expensive to run. And so certainly part of that answer is there are not unlimited resources. But again, we do know that it's the personnel that exists on our campuses. A school like Cesar Chavez has over 200 employees, 2,000 students, and all of them play a role in school safety. And there's a second part to that question, Richard.
Yeah, the second part was, as for students, what could be consequences, and could Cesar Chavez deny enrollment to a student?
And when Arizona has a gun-free schools requirement and statute, and that statute, of course, is imposed upon schools, which says that the presence of firearms on campus is strictly prohibited and shall result in an expulsion. Some exceptions can be made to that, but firearms in schools in Arizona are not welcome. They're not welcome in Phoenix Union either, and consequences for these actions will align to our policy and to statute. Thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate your questions and concern about school safety, not just in Phoenix Union. I think this is an important topic all across our city, across our state, across our nation, especially as youth are coming out of and still grappling with a pandemic and isolation, and what is it like to re-implement themselves into a community. I think safety and wellness is an extremely important topic that we'll continue to have, and appreciate your support.
Thank you, Dr. Guestin, and thank you, members of the media, for attending this afternoon. I've went ahead and put my email address in the chat. If you have any follow-up questions or need further information, please feel free to reach out to me, richard.franco@phoenixunion.org. And thank you all for attending. Have a great afternoon.